So today I'm going to show you how I make my crab fly that I use for redfish, black drum, especially the black drum. Been catching quite a few on this thing. It's made with a EP crab brush. I'm going to show you real quick how simple of crab fly this is. I have a number 2 hook. I'm going to put on some extra small eyes depending on how deep the water is, what size the fish are. You can modify your hook size and or eye size. Already have my thread started. Put these eyes on real quick, and again I might go as small as a number 4 or as big as a number 1 depending on what size these fish are. I'm going to bring my thread all the way back to the rear. I'm going to add some Sili legs, which are just fancy rubber bands. If you just only had a rubber band, you could use that. You can use whatever you want for your tail. I'm going to use some of these, and what I'm going to do is cut them in half from the length that they came. So now I have 4 pieces, and make sure that they're not stuck together at the end. And then I'm going to take these 4 pieces and put them the middle, the thread in the midpoint of that, bring it up here to the top of the hook, and I'm going to tie these so now they cannot be pulled off. Tie these onto the top of my hook, and so they just kind of randomly stick out like that. Doesn't really matter where they go. Keep our thread right there, and then we're going to get our EP brush. So it comes various colors, comes on a piece of wire, so you're going to need something to cut this wire. It runs right down the middle. Little tiny piece of wire sticking out here. If you need a little more, you can pull these fibers right off the brush fibers right off the wire. I want the fibers pointing back away from my hook when I stick this on here. I'm going to lay it down there, tie it on nice and tight. Make sure it's secure. I'm going to bring my thread all the way up to just behind the eyes. If you have a rotating vise, this is going to make things a lot simpler. If you don't, you're going to have to rotate this around by hand and then somehow keep the thread out of your way as well. But what we're going to do is we're going to take this brush and we're going to spin it around and around and around till we get up to the eyes, one layer in front of the other. And we're going to do this slow enough so that we can pick these fibers out and make sure that they're not trapping underneath each other. So as I come forward nice and slow, I might have to stop, fluff it up a little bit, make sure they're not all caught underneath each other. But it only takes me 4 or 5 turns, and I'm all the way up here behind my eyes on a hook, on a number 2 hook. Now what I'm going to do is tie this off. So I'm going to take my thread, still staying behind the eyes, and make 3 or 4 wraps nice and tight behind the eyes before I cut this off. Make sure it's not going to unravel. I'm going to take my wire cutters, snip this off nice and close, pull everything back away from the eye, and start wrapping that up. Make sure it doesn't come unwound. Get plenty of wraps in there. Come over the eyes, and I'm going to leave the thread hanging here because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to trim this up. If I wasn't going to put a weed guard on here, if you're fishing over only sand, you can just finish it up right here. You go right to the trimming part, you're done. I'm going to put a weed guard on. The weed guard is going to be in my way for my trimming. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put this around once, twice, pull that down so it's secure, it's not going to come unwound. Now I can pull it out of the vise and I can start trimming it. I want to get rid of all this stuff here that's in my gap of my hook. I'm going to flatten out the back and I'm going to trim up the shape. So I'm going to speed this up so that you don't have to spend 3 or 4 minutes watching this. But first thing I'm going to do is fluff this all up. Make it as wide as possible before we start trimming it down. Now let's start doing my trimming. So you can see our crab coming into shape now. We want it shorter up near the eyes, a little wider as it gets out. We want it basically the same length on each side. I can trim this down flat because the crab is going to be sitting on the bottom like so. So it's going to ride a hook up. So the fish isn't going to see the bottom. We can trim this nice and flat. The less fiber you have here, the less water it's going to hold when you're trying to cast it, the easier it'll be to cast. The bigger you make this fly, the slower it's going to sink, and the harder it's going to be to cast. So final little trims, you can see I make it relatively small. I want to make sure my gap is clear here. Our legs are hanging out the back, so they wobble around, get a little life. Now I can come back and put my weed guard on. So to make my weed guard, I'm going to use some 25-pound saltwater tippet. It says hard tippet. I like that because it's a lot stiffer than regular mono. So regular 25-pound mono is nowhere near as stiff as this. It doesn't keep the grass off as well, I don't think. So first I'm going to cut a little piece off. Then there's various ways to do this. My method, I fold it in half. Instead of trying to stick that on the hook and get that to stay on the hook, I make things a lot easier by taking my needle nose, pinching that down. Now it'll stay in a V for me. Put that right in front of the eyes and hold it down in place as I make some wraps. Move this a little closer to the eye so I have room. I want to leave some room right behind the eye so I can finish it. So I'm wrapping over the top of that V. Now I can check where that's going to come back, where I need to cut it off. So just where it's reaching the point, I can cut that off. And now to keep that from flattening out, I can come in between the hook point and my weed guard a few times. That'll help make that weed guard stand up a little better. Now I'm going to whip finish this thing. If you have a tool, you can use that. If not, you can do it by hand. And my final touch is using some hard as nails. Just a little dab on those threads to keep them from coming unraveled. And I like to use the least amount of glue possible to keep that scent down. I don't want my whole fly stinking like a bunch of glue. So there's my finished product. It'll ride up this way. It sits flat on the back. Got my legs hanging out. So there's an easy EP crab fly. You can make it in various colors. I like the green one, the green colors for the black drum, the redfish here in Central Florida. Wherever you fish, you might find another color works great for you. Give that a try for a quick and easy crab fly.